for the season timeline, checklist of responsibility, coaches trainings. We want to devote quite a bit of time to discussion of the MPSSAA Code of Maryland Regulations, dual participation conflict, and then after that, the collection of student athlete forms plus the non-student athlete Class A clearances, any rules, updates, and reminders, and then regular season host responsibilities and any Q&A at the end, as I said. So as I introduced myself before I started the recording, my name is Allie Rock. This is my second year as the Unified Tennis Chair. My previous 2 years in the program before that were as the Unified Tennis Assistant Chair. I did start with Special Olympics as a Unified Tennis coach way back when. Mark Sunkel is our Unified Tennis Assistant Chair. He's out of Frederick County. I am locally based in Charles County. And Mark had a professional development that he was unable to, or that had gotten switched due to the holiday. So he is not on the call, but you'll hear from him from time to time during the season. Just as an introduction to some of the people you'll be hearing from and seeing this season, here is the state of Maryland maps and the district representatives that are assigned to each of those regions who participate in tennis. So you see Melissa Anger is a familiar face. She is all the counties in yellow. Kendall is all the counties in blue. Kristen Mullins handles all the counties in orange, and Ron Freeman does the Baltimore region, which is in green. However, Baltimore, Howard, and Harford counties do not participate in tennis, but Baltimore City does. So an exciting announcement this year is that Interscholastic Unified Sports is going to go green, and we are going to try this season having all coaches' resources available online via the Google folder only. So we will not be shipping coaches' resource guides to you. You can visit the Unified Tennis folder on or after June 1st and share that with your coaches. Resources, all the resources that we had last year will flip over, and then also we'll add a little bit to it. So we'll have the 2018 Coaches Resource Guide, any Special Olympics Maryland related forms, then coaches training tools that have begun to be developed over the last few years, and we've been sharing with you. Coaches training tool, or excuse me, and then the IUS logo if you need to add that to any of your communications. So what is available now is the coaches contact list, and if you could visit that link and start to list all the coaches and the contact information in that section starting now. That is pretty crucial for the district representatives to do and have your coaches fill it out, or please pre-populate it with your coaches' names, because that's where we get a sense of where there are schools that have teams training. So if you could do that as soon as you know a coach will be at a school. Okay, so for as of spring 2018, the district representative checklist looks like this. So in the spring right now, contact your supervisors of athletics and or athletics directors. Identify coaches at each school, set your regular season playing schedule and district tournament date or location, solicit equipment needs, and work with necessary parties to fill the need. Ensure coaching vacancies are advertised, schedule and advertise district-specific coaches briefing, review the form, scheduling, busing, etc. So you can do your coaches briefing web-based or in person, and Special Olympics Maryland can help facilitate those as we did last year. And then schedule and announce to coaches and ADs the player assessment sessions or plan, which we'll get to the proposed season timeline in a moment. So these are, this would be your season timeline beginning in spring 2018. So right now, as we said, Here are some things that you can do to start to get ready for the season, which sort of seems to always start with a bang and go really fast once we hit September. So you can display your recruitment posters. Every school system should have those by now. Host interest meetings, do local school system specific type of things that you need to do, like get your match schedule set, your busing schedule, whatever on your end. And then distribute information to rising freshmen, if there are any back to school nights or if there's a way to get into the middle schools. Distribute information to your PTSA and similar recruitment outlets. Distribute information to special ed teachers or department chairs. There's probably a lot of transition meetings happening right now for rising middle schoolers going into high school. So that's a great place to advertise so that parents are aware of the opportunities that will be given to students in high school, any National Honor Society advisors, Best Buddies advisors, etc. And just this afternoon, I was thinking almost every school system at this point has a very visible and nicely followed Facebook page, Twitter account, Instagram accounts. It is a really good idea to get in contact with whoever in your county, your district is in charge of those social media accounts and get them the information, have them design for you an infographic, or you can do that, or we can help you do that, and have them advertising Unified Tennis throughout the summer even from those accounts. Surely there's someone in the central office all summer long. So that's another way to distribute information about Unified Sports. So here are the list of school systems that participate. So what we will be distributing you and asking you to kind of fill out for us is whenabouts you'll have your preseason meeting, and then the date of your district tournament. So the sooner we know those, the better, so that we can support you with any staffing needs. And we'll get to the district time or the timeline in a second. So this is, as you can see, the season timeline is highly tentative and subject to change. The relevant dates are that MPSSAA fall practice start dates allow you to start Wednesday, August 8th. September 4th, school starts, so practices can start. And actually, I think that date might be wrong. I think September 4th is the date of Labor Day, so it's actually September 5th. And then the weeks of September 17th through 21st is the proposed timeline for player assessments to happen for player ratings. And then Wednesday, September 19th, applications for participation and affirmation of eligibility would be due, and Class A requirements for coaches due to district representatives or regional sports director in the absence of a district representative. And then Wednesday, September 26th, so just following player assessments, the postseason registrations would be due to those people. And as we said, this is subject to change, but what we do want to stress is that the deadlines this year, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion about the deadlines because at this point they're still working. It would be the deadlines are going to be the deadlines. So we aren't going to we're going to publish them in the resource guide this way. If you want to move that submission date up because that your coaches need a little bit more flexibility or whatever, but the date that's listed is the day that those are going to be due to Special Olympics, and we have to stick to deadlines this year. There's a lot that has to go on our end that is completely held up if things like postseason registrations aren't done on time and that sort of thing. Then October 8th through October 20th is the proposed window of time for district tournaments, and October 24th will be the state tournament pre-competition webinar, which you can even register right now. Then we are still looking at the date for the state tournament. We have the week of October 29th or the week of November 5th for the state tournament. considerations being that the week of October 29th would be probably a little bit of a condensed season. That's a little early, but however, there are some considerations for the week of November 5th. Monday, schools are closed for a teacher workday in a few counties, and then Tuesday is election day, so that's usually closed for students. So I'm actually going to ask, and also noting that teams should be conducting their season for a minimum of 8 weeks, with teams practicing at least twice a week and participating in 3 or more competitions during the season. So those of you who are self-muted, if you could unmute and give any sort of updates that, any considerations that we should think of for those dates. Otherwise, we can continue this discussion maybe via follow-up email. So if anybody knows of a blackout date for their school system during either of those weeks. Okay, no one is unmuting, so I guess no one has input on that just yet. Also, if you are not able to be unmuted, you can always also type a question into the chat box, and that way I can read it on screen and we can have that discussion. Okay, so stay tuned for the date of the state tournament. We will follow up on that as soon as we can. So as always, the affirmation of the student participation form will be due as part of the criteria for being eligible to play. And this year, we want to solicit anybody who would like to pilot submitting this form in digital, in a digital capacity. So a lot of school systems have gone to their sports paperwork is done completely online. And so we are hoping that people would be interested in completing this paperwork or adding this to their process online. Okay, I just got a message that I might have accidentally muted you people. So Seth just unmuted. And Melissa, who was texting me, you might be able to unmute as well now.
Yes, thank you. I'm good.
Okay,
thank you,
sorry. Okay, so if there's anyone who would be willing to volunteer to act as a pilot, to do the paperless registration, to just have this form completed and submitted that way, then just let me know. Okay, Michelle Hill, you raise your hand. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Seth.
No, I don't know if every school in the county would, but like definitely La Plata and North Point would be great pilot schools for the paperless registration.
Okay, great. Okay. Michelle Hill, were you trying to say something?
No, I was just trying to volunteer.
Okay. Oh, great. For Olive Frederick, right?
Packet.
Cool. All right, that sounds great.
Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Kelly. Just a note here, we are taking volunteers, so we'll follow up. Our office will have to follow up with your respective supervisor of athletics, perhaps risk managers and those people with those ranks. So yeah, we would love to incorporate the masses and have everyone take part in the pilot, but for now we want a small sample, find success early, and we need to work through some red tape, obviously. So we invite everyone to participate in the pilot, but know that it will be a narrow few that would ultimately be selected. But the sooner the better, we know. Thank you so much.
Okay, Sue is asking how to unmute, so we're going to try to figure out how to get her to unmute so she can weigh in because she is on the web. Melissa, if you have any insight into how I can unmute her.
So you should have received a code of sorts in the email that you received confirming your registration for the webinar.
So
It's
the audio
usually
code.
a two-digit code. Commonly, I think that then you would select the asterisk or the pound sign afterwards. So pull up that email and it should be the audio code, as
Okay,
Alex said.
great. Okay. All right, cool. So if you could, anybody who volunteered there, just follow, we'll follow up, reaching out to you. Okay. The application for participation will stay the same as in previous years. And of course, just having the district representatives, you all will collect these, and in the absence of a district representative, the regional sports director, so for Allegheny and Garrett, that's Melissa Anger. So these will, the buck like stops first with you. So as you all know, everybody who's experienced in this knows that you check over all paperwork before submitting it to the next level up for any errors. And of course, the earlier you're able to submit it, the earlier, if there is a box that's unchecked, it can be sent back and corrected. At the same time that those participation applications are due, then you'll also submit the affirmation of eligibility. After last tennis season, we actually updated this to include a travel party section. So a lot of teams know ahead of time that they are going to need someone to travel with them to the district or the state tournament. Examples being an instructional assistant, an extra chaperone, a nurse who needs to do some one-on-one feeding or changing, any kind of assistance with toileting or those sorts of things. Or you just have a very large team and you have extra student managers, extra coaches, that sort of thing. All of these people need to be listed on the affirmation of eligibility, and then also need to complete the Class A clearance, which we'll talk about in 1 second. But I know that not every team advances to states, but we do need to know those people prior to the district tournament. And it just, as far in advance as you can work on the identifying those people within your district, so that they can be listed on this form, and then also have their Class A clearance completed. That will enable us to do the state invitational credentialing, and then we don't have to send out yet another Google form or whatever we've done in the past to collect those names. Those people will be collected up front. Okay, I think there's a question. Hang on 1 second. Okay, we're good. And just making sure. Okay, great. So non-student athlete clearances. So every non-student athlete has to obtain a Special Olympics Class A clearance. Any adults who are 18 years or older have to complete the 2-page volunteer application. They do not need to provide their social security number. And then they have to pass the protective behaviors training by watching a brief video and completing a short quiz. The links you'll see, and we will also email this presentation out so that you'll all have the links in your emails. And that is every non-student athlete. So managers are included. There is a different process for minors. So any student managers, any non-student, every single person who is a non-student athlete, so any team managers have to complete the 2-page volunteer application and the student minor volunteer references form, and they have to pass the protective behaviors training by watching the brief video and completing the short quiz. The student minor volunteer reference form, I believe there needs to be 2 references, and the coaches may be one of them. So that's just one right off the bat that they can have filled out for them. This is what the protective behaviors training looks like, and it gives an option to print the confirmation. So you can see the screenshot here that allows you to print the confirmation once you've completed it. So that way, there is a lot of questions sometimes. Let me just go back to that for a second. A lot of times coaches will bypass you, the district representatives, and just email like Melissa or I, and they'll say, is my protective behaviors, did it go through? I completed it. So just let them know ahead of time, this is the way that they can print for confirmation and to keep it. So then if, they mistakenly get put on a list of not having completed it, they can just, they have the proof of the training completed. Okay, so we do need to discuss briefly who should collect the non-student athlete Class A materials. In the past, it was like submitted online, and then it had to be submitted directly to someone at Special Olympics. The regional sports directors have collected it. District representatives have. So if there's any strong feelings on who should complete that collection. If you could weigh in now.
Hi everyone, it's Melissa again. Just a reminder that we initially established that Class A forms would be submitted to our office because they did include a social security number. So for confidentiality's sake, that was the most direct means of submission. Since then, we no longer need a social security number to run a background check. So that's far more liberal with the submission lines. So add to that, and I'll mute again so everyone can talk.
Seth, you can go ahead.
Just one area where like it might be better to have the regional directors collected directly is that like they have the information. SMLD should have the information of who needs it. Okay. So it might be easier for them, like if they get the list of coaches early enough to check, because we might have a coach that we think has already turned into Class A or hasn't turned into Class A, but they're not showing up as turned it in. It might be easier for them to like contact them directly to get that information, or at least say to us, hey, have them send the Class A information in.
Okay. Sue Snyder says, I feel that the regional director should collect the forms. Any other feedback? Go ahead, Michelle.
So I 100% agree that we can collect the forms as long as we get a list so that we know who needs new ones.
Okay.
I think that would be the only hiccup.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. So we have two people saying regional directors and Michelle Hill saying it's fine as for district reps if there's a list. So it might be, for efficiency's sake, it might be better for the regional sports directors, but we'll talk a little bit more about that from Melissa's angle, because she'll know, their workload and that sort of thing, or even how to get you a list or that sort of thing. Okay. Coaches training options for tennis. Last year, we started giving the option to move away from a live in-person training. So you have option one to do a pre-recorded or a live webinar to review the coach's resource guide and the resources, or you can do a pre-recorded or live webinar, briefly reference the resource guide, and then thoroughly review best practices, including scoring, recruitment strategies, and reference resources, or none of the above. I know like Seth and Charles still likes to do an in-person coaches training, which does have quite a bit of value for that region or that sort of thing. But there should be a coaches training happening for each area, that sort of thing. Okay. So just as far as your planning goes, for the upcoming dates, to definitely take a look at when what training option you'll do, and then when you'll hold that training. Okay, so we have to have quite a bit of discussion around the COMAR regulations. Okay, we have in the past interpreted these two different COMAR regulations in one capacity. So there are two different COMAR regulations that collide. A varsity or junior varsity team member of the previous season may not participate in interscholastic competition and in intramurals or school-sponsored programs in the same sport outside the sports season. And then we have the secondary school students in grades 9 through 12 who participate in the corollary athletic program may not have participated in an interscholastic athletic team in the same sport. So we have interpreted, I believe the last 3 years, we've interpreted this COMAR regulation as if a student has ever seen varsity level competition, has stepped on the court for a scored match, they are forever and always ineligible for unified sports in the same sport. So if they had ever been on the varsity tennis team, which a lot of times is no cut, and seen a scored match, that they could not participate in unified sports. I'm actually going to exit out of this screen real quick because I'm going to bring up the Survey Monkey. So we do need to discuss, and we don't have all of the school systems represented on this phone call right now. There's Michelle Hill is out of Frederick, Seth out of Charles for representing Charles and Calvert, and then Sue for Cecil County is on. We have Anne, who I believe is listening in for Allegheny and Garrett, or Allegheny or Garrett, excuse me. But we do need, I just want to find the what the actual Survey Monkey will say when you go to it. So we would like to have some discussion about how this regulation should be interpreted, because we have been given sort of the idea that these two COMAR regulations can be open to a less restrictive interpretation than we have previously implemented. However, we do need to have a consensus about how Special Olympics and unified sports should interpret these regulations. So what the options are that your participating school system should interpret and apply the regulation independently, and a consistent application of the regulations are not necessary. So leaving it up basically to each school system to interpret how those go and to enforce them on their end. Or another option is for us to set the precedent that returning players, so student athletes who have competed in tennis at the junior varsity or varsity level, are forever and always ineligible for participation on a unified tennis team, which is how we have previously interpreted these regulations. But what would be allowable are those who had participated in an interscholastic tennis team but have not seen any competition action. So like we said, someone who has stayed on the roster as an exhibition player, or someone who wasn't on the starting roster, but never played a scored match, that they would not be considered a returning player. And then the other option that we would be considering is that student athletes who have competed in tennis at the junior varsity and varsity level are ineligible for competition on the unified tennis team for one complete school year. So during the year in which the student athlete does not compete, they could practice with his or her team. So an example would be that student athletes who have competed as a member of an interscholastic tennis team in the 2017-2018 school year are ineligible to compete in the 2018 unified season, but they could practice, but then they would become eligible for next fall, the 2019 unified tennis season. So we've sort of informally dubbed this the red shirt option. Or if none of those options above our work, we would if somebody had an alternate interpretation, they could vote that way. But we would like to have some discussion from you guys on what should be the interpretation. So if anybody has some input on to how, because this does affect the tennis program quite a bit.
So Michelle Hill here.
Sure, go ahead.
So we've kind of had a lot of discussion in our county, and we've had kids that have wanted to do a unified after playing varsity because of an injury, and it's nice for them to still have some of that tennis knowledge and share some of that tennis knowledge with our student athletes. So it would be a nice thing. They have not participated thus far, but it would be maybe a nice option for them to participate. But by taking that year off.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm in favor of the red shirt.
The red shirt option.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I talked to our director of athletics, Kevin Cooper, and he's also on.
That's what he feels. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Oh, I muted Melissa again somehow. Go ahead, Seth.
Sorry. This is Seth talking from Charles. And we've talked about it too, and we actually want option one, the school system be able to interpret and apply the COMAR regulation independently. Basically, it affects both unified and interscholastic students. So, we'd like the ability to just interpret it independently and think it would be the fairest.
Okay, Melissa, did I unmute you yet?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Go ahead.
I think it's very important for those probably listening to this retroactively to please do complete the survey so that you can formally express the position of your school system, and as a reminder that you are representing not your personal opinion but the opinion of the school system as a whole. So please do talk with your key stakeholders to make sure that that is the case when you do submit. And then as well, contrary to the track season when we had 6 school systems participating, we did conduct a similar survey, and we were actually, we did not have to move to a position to have a consensus. But now with tennis, we have 17 school systems, so we're really not sure where the outcome will be in all of this, if it's majority rules, if it's any various options. So right now it's an information gathering, and it's really important that we do achieve completion of the survey sooner than later. And if you are a district representative that represents multiple school systems, please do reach out to your supervisors and ask him or her to complete the survey as well. If you're not comfortable in doing so, or if they're not following through after you've made the request, please notify me and I'm happy to contact those folks. Thank you.
So, and also something to consider in the discussion is that we do, it does come up a few times a year, and especially in some of our smaller school districts, that we do have the question of someone who's not a high-level varsity player but has played. Sue Snyder has written, why is track and field allowed to play track and field and indoor track and field? I'm assuming you mean outdoor and indoor. That's what happens in our county. We are finding it hard to not allow tennis players to play on the corollary tennis teams. And she says, we will complete the survey.
Sorry, I have a question. And this is kind of to Melissa, but what does Special Olympics take on the COMAR regulation? Like what, because there's so many extenuating circumstances when it comes to, I think, tennis, and, I think I understand the intent of the regulation, but like what does Special Olympics think about? Like what is their take, or what do they think about it?
That's a good question. We actually don't have a position. I know that sounds like we're skirting the topic, but generally speaking, we need to appeal to Southern Garrett High School that has a graduating class, 60 or less people, as is the case with North County High School and Anne Arundel County on the very other extreme of the spectrum with population. So this is not our regulation. As you said, it's COMAR, so it's MPSSAA. We just want to make sure we are discussing these points, making everyone aware of the regulations so that there's no ignorance and violations.
You know,
So, yeah.
well, and just, after talking with Mr. Lee here about it, like, if that's the case, it might be prudent to say, like, I definitely think it, should be on an affirmation form and something that everybody is aware of. Like, hey, we have to follow these regulations, but maybe it should come down to local interpretation, depending on what county and, for some of the different circumstances that if a student that's injured and can't compete at the same level anymore and they redshirt, maybe that would, in a county, it's because I assume it would affect their eligibility for varsity also, so, we should definitely be aware that, a varsity player isn't playing because it's going to affect their varsity season, too. Um, so maybe it is a local interpretation, after talking with Mr. Lee, I think that was the Charles County perspective, or it was a Charles County perspective. That's all.
Right. And I think that's what Sue is saying too, is that it would actually help participation in her county to allow some of, the varsity players to come out and fill in some of those partner roles. Correct me if I'm wrong in the question box, Sue, but I believe that's sort of what you're getting at. And that might be the perspective of the smaller school systems, that if they were able to interpret the rule to allow for more participation. If I'm just trying to interpret without bias what someone is saying. Yes, that is, Sue says yes, that is correct. Okay, so yeah, so definitely have those conversations, and we will send out some reminders. We definitely want to have good participation on that survey because not all school systems are represented on this phone call right now. And we had hoped to have quite a bit of participation with discussion. But thank you, Michelle, Sue, and Seth for weighing in on that. And also Melissa for letting it sort of be transparent what the Special Olympics stance is on it.
Yes, one last note and a point of conversation as you reach out to your stakeholders, as we call them. Be sure to raise the question if your varsity tennis coach is the unified tennis coach as well, because there are defined, as everyone knows, defined MPSSA seasons, and we don't want to risk a violation.
Right.
Should that be a dual responsibility of practicing out of those defined seasons? So that is another point of consideration.
Right, definitely. So we'd have to see if there was something that would violate if the varsity tennis coach was coaching unified and also varsity players on that unified team. So definitely consider that in your discussions. Okay. So with that, if there's not any other discussion with those who are on the call live, we'll keep it moving. And feel free to buzz in. We can always go back to things if you think of something as we go along. So rule changes are solicited on alternate years, usually the odd years. So rule changes will not really occur this year unless relevant to health and safety. If we have time towards the end of the presentation, I'd like to bring up kind of a point of conversation. Not quite a rule change, but something that might make match scheduling a little bit simpler. We can get to that in a minute. This is the district layout, the district map. It'll remain the same as the last few years. District tournament advancements, so semifinals to the state tournament, only apply to unified tennis, indoor and outdoor bocce. So that's us. And a lot of times the question always comes up pretty early, how many advancements to states do we get? And that is completely dependent on how many teams are participating throughout the state, just so you can answer that for coaches who might have the question. So if people want to know, just, it's when we get those postseason registrations in. And then as a reminder, Special Olympics Maryland partners with Leveling the Playing Field, which is a nonprofit that provides free sports equipment by the way of equipment grants to school systems. Leveling the Playing Field collects youth sporting equipment throughout the youth sports industry and distributes it at no cost to schools, youth and after-school programs, neighborhood sports leagues, and communities in general looking to bring free or affordable recreational sports opportunities to low-income students in the DC and Baltimore area. So in 4 years, LPF has donated over $1.5 million worth of sporting equipment to over 300 different programs locally. So I do know some school systems took advantage of this last year. Definitely take advantage of it this year, especially if you know now, here today, May 24th, that you have a school system that needs, a school that needs rackets and that sort of thing, to definitely get to the SurveyMonkey link and put that in now so you can have it in place in the fall. All right, here's a synopsis. So we have the district representative checklist on slides 7, 8, and 9. Available now, populating the coach's contact list. Visit that link that's listed, and you can list all coaches and contact information. So if right now all you have is a name and an email, go ahead and put that in so that we can start to see what schools will have teams this year. Since not all schools in a school system always participate. Then on or after June 1st, we will have the 2018 Unified Tennis folder live. And as we said, we're going green, and all of those resources that we talked about will be listed in there. So this is the questions, concern, discussion. Before we open it up to any of that, I'd like to return to, I believe it is slide 7 or 8, talking about, no, I'm sorry, it's in the coaches, it's in the season timeline. So we have, I'm just going to put the slide up again. We have player ratings should occur the weeks of September, with the week September 17th through the 21st. That's sort of when the window opens. And I just want to review, because it seems like every year there's always a question about how should the player ratings be conducted, who should be doing them, what should we do, what are they for? So player assessments should be done by someone who does not have a conflict of interest, and also has the tennis expertise to recognize and follow the rubric. We have found a resource was created a few years ago by our previous tennis chair, Kevin Reynolds, on how to run a rating session. It's written in kind of narrative form, and it's very easy to follow. We've gotten good feedback on how to implement a player rating system or session, excuse me. However, we are still getting inconsistent application of the player rating, the player raters, I should say. So no, under no circumstances should the unified tennis coach be the one who's giving the official rating. That is conflict of interest. That's not a neutral party. We do ask that the unified tennis coaches pre-rate their student athletes before the rating session. That's been requested by the raters themselves. They say that it gives them a good starting point, and then they can quickly assess if that rating needs to go down, up, or stay exactly where it is. Now, that is a way for a unified tennis coach to give some input, especially because we know some student athletes get nervous during the rating session, and that can be a conversation between them and the rater. However, ratings should not be completed by the unified tennis coach and then just submitted to the district representative and taken as the rating. So they shouldn't be done by other high school student athletes too. You can certainly solicit members of the varsity team or those with tennis experience to help you stay organized during a rating session, that sort of thing, help get players warmed up and that sort of thing. But the ratings themselves should be done by either your high school varsity coach can do that, or a local USTA official. Down here in Southern Maryland, we happen to have a USTA rater who will come and do our ratings. Mark Sunkel, our assistant chair, he's out of Frederick. He could be tapped in to be a rater. I have done player ratings in counties before, but start to figure out and identify who will do your player ratings right now, so that if you are running into any issues where you can't find a player, you can't find someone we can help you. We can help you prior to those dates, those player rating dates, to get someone out to do those player ratings. But that will be strictly enforced this year. We really can't have player ratings being done by high school students or being done by the unified tennis coach themselves. And then after those player assessments, the coaches can form their doubles teams, identify those students who are going to be in individual skills competition, and then you should have whatever timeline you need to collect those postseason registrations as the district representative, or in the absence of a district representative, the regional sports director, and then you should verify any mistakes that might be on that form before you forward it to myself and Mark. The regional sports directors will not be like the next conduit usually of the postseason registrations. They are for the applications and the affirmations. But last year it was there were quite a few mistakes because coaches were sending their forms directly to me before they kind of hit the district representatives. And that wasn't statewide, just so you know. That was just kind of like pockets here and there. But it is really important that if we are going to help, a lot of district representatives ask us to help do their match scheduling for their district tournament, and those sorts of things. All of that gets held up if we have to send the postseason registration form back to the coaches because there are mistakes. And last year I created a quick 5-minute, I think it's 5 or 10 minutes webinar PowerPoint that points out some of the common mistakes that we have. So that'll be in the Google folder. Share that with your coaches, because a lot of it comes down to they're just sort of putting together their pairs without really paying attention to variance in the rating, or they're putting kids that should be in individual skills in a doubles pair, that sort of thing. So are there any questions about that? Seth is raising his hand.
Yeah, and sorry, I lost during the slide when you went over it before. I was disconnected briefly. But so for Wednesday, September 19th, it says that they're due to the district reps, right, for the applications.
So that'll be published in the resource guide.
Okay, so when are they due to the regional sports directors then?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because if I have to turn them in that day, then really I have to collect them on the 12th, which even at my best schools, I don't see having everybody's in at that point.
So this would be input probably from you guys now. So from Michelle, from Sue, if that's when they would be turned into you guys, we can set the date when they should be due to Special Olympics. But just like the precedent we sent with track and field, that we would want them to be as free from error as humanly possible when they do go to Special Olympics, which those of you on the call know the drill with that. Miss Melissa, do you want to weigh in on this? Okay, Michelle Hill says, I think we can collect them by the 19th and then send them to Special Olympics a few days later. I agree with Seth. We need time to check everything over. So what would be a good timeline for you guys? Because we do want to make sure we have that built in.
I think on the screen, These are the dates as they would appear in my mind, and it may not read that way, as they would appear in the coach's resource guide. And we've been caught as recent as fall of last year caught up with, well, that's the published date, so that's the date that all of the coaches in all of the world go by. So we don't want to advertise something because no one reads the footer or few abide by the footer that reads district representatives can change, adjust due dates accordingly. So yeah, these are the things that we need to know, and we're looking to establish the published dates, which are the dates that they would get them into your hands.
Okay, so
Meaning district reps.
right. So what do we want to say is the final stop for submitting these to Special Olympics, these forms? And should they be, and then the next question is, should they be due this, like, should you turn them into Special Olympics the same time you're going to turn in the postseason registration? So getting a few days to do the applications and then the postseason. Okay, Seth raised his hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was a mistake,
Oh,
but like, I mean, I don't know. Like for track, it was actually I thought it worked out well. I would email Kristen and she would get back to me, and by the deadline we were pretty much set. So I think it was like a week basically.
yeah.
You know,
That's what Michelle Hill is saying. Could the following Wednesday work for both of those dates? I would say, yeah. So I'm looking at September 19th is a Wednesday. So give about a week to check them over and then submit to Special Olympics September 26th, which is the date the postseason registrations are due. And then all of those checked over for error by the district reps and then submitted to the postseason registrations will go directly to myself and Mark so that we
now
can check those
if
over.
those are due the 26th, and this is just to be clear, do you want those on the 26th then? Really?
Only if they've been checked. You know what I
So,
mean? So that's why I would say
like, would it be
another week
another
for that.
week for that? Okay.
Well, is would that work for you, Michelle and Sue? If you got the postseason registrations, checked them over for error, and had about a week to check those and send them off as well. So the submit to Special Olympics would be the 26th and October 3rd, respectively, for those two things. Oh, I muted you, Michelle. I'm sorry. I think I muted you. You
No,
can
I'm
speak now. Go
totally
ahead.
typing this. You've totally answered my questions because I was going to say, so then we'll turn the other one in a week later. No, I think that makes perfect sense. Is that enough time for Special Olympics?
I would say that gives for sure the regional sports directors, giving them time to get those in order. October 3rd, if we have, and I'm just going to show, if we have the window for district tournaments open October 8th through the 20th, which is really the 19th, for district tournaments, and a lot. Those postseason registrations are needed for match scheduling. If they were like set, ready to go, meaning any teams that are combining have combined already and submitted, or any teams that are not going to participate in postseason because they do not have the minimum number, they've already been identified. If you've checked them and you make sure that everybody's pairs are eligible and that sort of thing, that's enough time for some of the earlier, that's enough time for some of the later tournaments. I would say if anybody's going to select the 8th or the 9th for a district tournament, that might be cutting it a little close. But if we can all agree as a group that those forms are going to be like on point, I can make sure that we can have quick turnaround time with those. When those postseason registrations are in order, scheduling the matches can be done in just a few hours. But when they're not in order, it's kind of a mess, as you all know. Okay, so Sue says yes, that sounds better. So it sounds like submit to Special Olympics 1 week later sounds good when they're all checked over. They've been checked for. So everybody who is participating in this call agrees with that. So that sounds good. So we'll go ahead and say that that's what will be done. And anybody who's listening to this presentation after with the recorded can
And of
know that
course, we
that's what
could
we'll do.
always get stuff in early too.
Yes.
Like some of,
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to get the schools that my coaches are already reply. If I can get them up and running, get those in early, so we're not bombarding people with,
Right.
two. I'm sure if you're a regional sports director, getting everybody's school on the,
Right. And that was
one
always,
day.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's always like Barb in Washington County, had raised last season that she would get hers in before the deadline so that she could, that sort of thing. Okay, we only have about a minute or two, but does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? We can always continue this over email. I just checked my question box. Okay. Okay, so with that, guys, we'll end so that we end on time. Sue says no thanks. Thank you, everybody who was able to participate. I see that Barb was able to log in. Hey, Barb. So if you have anything else after we stop this presentation, we'll send out the link probably tomorrow morning to view this for everybody. And then just some reminders, definitely submit that COMA regulation interpretation survey and start populating your coaches trainings, and we will be in touch with you very soon. So thank you guys. Thanks for being on, and enjoy your Memorial Day weekend.
Hey, Melissa, if you're still on, can you stay on for a second to talk about some Charles County specific stuff?
Yeah, I'll stop the recording if Melissa's able to stay on. Okay, thanks guys.